Certainly been a roller coaster several days in this town, and we always appreciate setting this time aside for the mayor of Kansas City. Quinton Lucas is joining us on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. One of the many conversations over the last week that got kicked off on the show came late last week when Governor Mike Parson joined us and reacted to the tragedy of last Wednesday in this town. The governor came on and, he referred to the individuals that did what they did last week and killed a woman and injured 24 others as thugs who took over and ruined what happened. The mayor made national, this story went international in many ways, when he went on another radio show, and I'm upset he made national worldwide news on another radio show when he said that there was a dog whistle involved in that expression. So I wanted to welcome the mayor on and at least start there, Mr. Mayor. Do you, in hindsight, regret saying that the governor was dog whistling when he called murderers thugs?
No, not at all. Not at all. I was asked a question. It was part of as you probably know, unlike everybody else in the world, it's part of about a 20-minute interview I had on another program where we described the acts as heinous, the persons as criminals, suspects, assailants. We used any number of terms. I used any number of terms, but I shared my disagreement. And the governor and I know, and we've had a good relationship, and it'll continue to be a good one, that I have a different view on certain things as he has a different view from me. But no, I don't think that was necessarily the type of language I would use, and it certainly isn't the type of language that any one of our officers would use, or else they would find themselves in trouble on a witness stand or anything of the sort. I'm somebody who stood at a press conference as we announced charges against two of the suspects for, by the way, felony murder and second-degree murder, and I don't think that would have been additive in any way for a change of venue hearing, anything of that sort, either for myself, the prosecutor, the police chief, anyone in the Kansas City Police Department, or frankly, in my view, anybody in leadership to do that. Mm-hmm. We all have different jobs. You are a radio talk show host. You get to say largely whatever the heck you want. I am not. And so I actually think that my language should relate to that, and I believe that's the same for many of those who find themselves in leadership positions as well.
Mm-hmm. But you would admit that, when you look up the word thug in the dictionary, there is no racial component to it, right?
I actually, sure. Okay, I'll give you an answer on that. I certainly see how it can be expanded and is used more often, but I won't pretend to get into the heart and mind of anyone who is using such term, except for the many hundreds of people who have sent me emails, some of which with racial slurs and others in the time since, who talked to me about 13% of the population, which I assume is describing black folks, and any number of things relating to it. So I think there are many who do actually align a racial element to it. I think that is an observation that has been made by many others before me. But, others will have their views and all those sorts of things. I don't spend my time worrying about either what Fox News primetime hosts or Twitter trolls or others have to say. I do think that these folks committed heinous acts. I think that's why I'm glad that they were charged. I have any number of things to say about that. And as somebody who's talked to our homicide victims' family in the last week, other victim families, other people impacted, I do agree. I'd rather have the focus be on all of that rather than folks, I think, trying to make a lot of political hay out of points that are totally irrelevant, that ignore the actual issues that occurred in Kansas City.
Do you think the governor was going for that or not?
I don't think so. I wouldn't assign that viewpoint to him. I think he was speaking kind of candidly how he might wish. That's something that, I am tempted to do at times as well. Trust me. I have initial responses to just about everything I see and read. Many of your tweets I want to respond to almost immediately. But occasionally I'll think about, I got a different job. I've got a different role. And who actually helped me along with this? I think it was a police officer who probably doesn't like me that much. And in the summer of 2021, I did a bunch of visits to patrol divisions, and a guy came up to me and he said, I've been watching a lot of your recent spats with then Attorney General Eric Schmidt, and your language is the type that I don't find to be respectful to your position or his. There are kids watching you. There are any number of things, and I wish you would clean it up. And I've actually thought about it since. He may not know that I was listening to him or I took it to heart, but I did, and that's how I've tried to at least govern what I have to say in the future, even though, frankly, even back then, Attorney General Schmidt, I think I was right. It doesn't mean necessarily that that's the language I would need to employ.
Mayor Lucas is on KCMO Talk Radio, and he's always welcome to respond to our tweets whenever the mayor of Kansas City wants to do that. All right, so where are we at then on this investigation? First question I have, I mean, listen, I think that press conference the other day with the prosecutor lacked a lot of substance. There are still many questions. Do you know, can you share with this city the two juveniles who are in custody, not who they are, but are they in custody still, or are they out? Have they been released?
I believe the prosecutor answered that question. They remain in custody.
Oh, really? Okay. She said that that wasn't very clear. She said that they remained in custody?
As I understand the situation, and of course, full formal answers come either from KCPD or the Jackson County juvenile officer, but they remain in custody as far as I am aware as of this morning. You can certainly follow up. I would think even a sunshine request can get you that. Mm-hmm. But no, I think that, and let me expand on this a little bit, because there's been a lot of discussion that was part of my response on a different radio program last week about any number of conspiracies, attempts to hide things, anything like that. I think the sergeants, the captains, others who have worked on this investigation at KCPD have done important and, frankly, impressive work in a matter of days to get suspects, both juvenile and adults. I think that they have worked closely with prosecutors' offices, both on the adult side and the juvenile side. No one is trying to absolve anyone of guilt. No one's actually trying to defend any of the assailants. Certainly I never have either, despite what might be characterized elsewhere. And so I think that we're looking for justice for all of them, and I think you will see the full extent of the law apply to each one of the offenders. And so that's, I think, where things stand now. I think the prosecutor did note that the investigation continues, so there may or may not be other persons at large, but I know that we'll continue to share that information as conditions warrant.
Okay. Now, do you want to see, are you comfortable charging minors in this case as adults, as the leader of this city? You want to see that?
As you know good and darn well, it's not my call, but I think Missouri law allows for certification for certain offenses. I believe murder is one of those where you would have that sort of offense aggravated too. Certainly, I don't want to get ahead of facts, unlike literally everybody else that I've read commentary from, but I think the law lays out a process by which someone who is a minor can be charged as an adult. It certainly seems like these are the types of conditions that would warrant it.
What do you want to see when it comes to, because, I mean, you saw the way this thing devolved very quickly into guns and gun conversations and the whole thing. But what we do know now is we've got at least 4 people that are in custody, 2 adults, 2 juveniles. 3 of them, at the very least, under 21, could not even legally possess what they had. We know there was 1 illegal gun there. I think one thing we can all agree on, regardless of how anybody feels about gun laws, is how we get illegal guns off the streets and how we go after people who cannot legally possess the weapons that they have. What is the answer on how to go about doing that?
Yeah, I actually do agree with you. When you started with that, I was saying, we may have a disagreement. Yeah, we need to get illegal guns or guns either stolen and others off the streets. There are a few ordinances that the city of Kansas City has proposed any number of times for which we're preempted. One ordinance which exists right now is requiring mandatory reporting of stolen firearms. It is to get people to report their firearms so we know what we're looking for, so we know we can find certain offenses. Any number of Missourians have spoken to concealed weapons laws. And by the way, yes, criminals break laws. I heard you and Nick right. There was a big debate about that. Would these gentlemen have followed it? Probably not. But here's the thing. What we have done is taken all tools from police officers if they see a person who is carrying a firearm that may have some bulge, anything like that, or found elsewhere, right, to actually stop them, take the firearm off of them, and actually charge them with the crime. Our 22-year-old defendant, who we would note is actually not that old either, although clearly an adult, and I'm not defending them because people think you defend somebody if you actually give facts. But that was a gentleman who had a prior firearms offense, by the way, in the very non-woke Cass County, with a conservative prosecutor in Ben Butler, with a non-woke mayor of Belton, Missouri, right, who went through a process which, under Missouri's prior concealed carry laws, probably would have gotten him turned down for a permit. And what would that mean? That would mean that this guy, who probably carried a gun anywhere if he's carrying it to a parade, would have exposed himself to some sort of criminal liability if any officer at any point had ever seen him carrying a firearm. Right. Those are the sorts of things that I would think could make a difference. I see it this way. I don't want to come into your house and take your guns, Pete. I believe you're a lawful gun owner, perhaps, but nevertheless, you are not a criminal or anything of that sort. I want officers to have tools. And when I see officers, and by the way, people talk to me about minors in possession, you can't tell. You don't have probable cause to stop a 17-year-old versus a 19-year-old. They actually look kind of similar, or a 16-year-old. Now, yeah, maybe a 5-year-old, if you see them walking down the street with a gun, you can intervene. But if you just see a 17-year-old walking the streets of any part of our community or walking through one of our shopping centers, what you usually can't do, assuming, I'll say outside the shopping center to make the fact pattern easier, right? What you can't do is just walk up and say, hey, how old are you? All that sort of stuff. So, I want officers to have tools, and I think that would make all of us safer.
See, this is actually a conversation, and you got to tell your old pal Nick Wright, he's got to calm down next time he comes on the show. But anyway, my point is, you just said there, hey, if I see a guy, with a bulge that could be a big gun, I want law enforcement to do something about it. But you and I have talked about this before. You've been very hesitant to say, hey, things like stop and frisk are the answer. Let's see who's got what weapons on them. So what do you do? I mean, I think back to Operation Legend. 176 firearms were seized off the streets of Kansas City. Who knows how many lives were saved? You're still hesitant to support something like that coming back to town. So what do you do?
I don't actually think I am. I always think how you deploy something is actually important, right? I mean, the then President of the United States was talking about, in some ways, I think Democrats causing murders and carnage and all of that, which is a general talking point, which doesn't actually make the community sometimes want it in the event that you have people of those groups within them. But no, I absolutely am one who believes in tools. I would love, and we never have enough time on this chat, I'd love for us to have actually an honest conversation about more tools for officers. That includes the conversation you've had previously on stop and frisk. I think it is a travesty right now, that every weekend in the summer we've got Kansas City Police Department officers, Jackson County Sheriff's officers, and others who likely know that there are people in parking lots that are in these areas that are sitting with firearms and all these sorts of things, and there's very little we can do about it. I think that there need to be ways that we can intervene in more situations. Officers need tools. One of the most ridiculous questions I had during one of those press conferences last week, and I give huge accolades to Stacey Graves and the Kansas City Police Department, how they handled things last week. And I'm going to be fair and actually say even our county prosecutor getting charges that quickly, that's something that I think was a good step. But nonetheless, one of the questions was, well, did your officers fail because they didn't catch all these kids with guns in their backpacks and all of that? No, not at all. This is the nature of the law today. First of all, they can't have eyes on everything, but more than anything, it is the fact that, right, these people, in many situations, if one of them might have had a handgun, for example, our defendant, Mr. Mays, is apparently not committing any type of offense. That, to me, is preposterous. And what we can't do at the city right now for the next parade or the next big event is to say that, yeah, we're banning all guns. Don't bring them here. Don't take them out. And that puts us all at greater risk long term, and I think it puts our officers at greater harm long term as well.
So what do you do then? And listen, we've talked about this issue, this office, time and time again. You're saying that you'd be open to potential, whether it's ordinances or police tactics that would get guns out of the hands of people who don't have them. The next level of that is, of course, bringing charges. And whether it's right or wrong and whether it's too black and white of a conversation here is a different conversation. But what do you do when you have many in law enforcement who you hear from, I know, on a regular basis, because we both hear from them, who say, I don't trust the people who are supposed to charge these individuals to do their job. So, there's a laissez-faire approach. Whether right or wrong, that's the perception. How do you change that?
I have a very simple view of the world, which is that if there are laws that can be charged, then we should have our department, and our department does this work all the time, presenting those charges to municipal, county, and federal prosecutors. And that's what's important to me. We have any number of ordinances on the books of the city, and I had this chat in the public session of the Board of Police Commissioners on Tuesday this week, which is to say to our officers, you should feel free. You will have the support of this mayor if you are bringing charges of municipal offenses relating to any type of gun offenses. I think we need to see more of it in Kansas City. It's something I absolutely support. I'm not making comments on prosecutors at any other levels. I now learn that a lot of people listen to my radio interviews, and it's may become a national story. What I'm saying is, if we have a code of ordinances provision that says that someone is committing some sort of unlawful act, you should feel comfortable bringing them to municipal prosecutor, which, by the way, where I think more than 3/4 of the charges are filed. And so those are the sorts of things that I would do in support. And on our conversation, because here's the thing, right? And people can describe me however they want, particularly ones who don't know me. I actually tend to think that if you catch me on the right things, I'm actually pretty tough on crime and criminals. If you are committing an offense, I think you should be in jail almost instantly, frankly. And then you can work it all out after that. And so I would like to see more things like that with any of the shootings that I know you've talked about on this show, and I have. Those are the sorts of things I want to see charges on faster. If we need to just use municipal ordinance violations that only get a year in incarceration, well, at the very least, we've gotten that swift and certain punishment, even if not particularly severe.
You alluded to it there. St. Patrick's Day Parade is right around the corner. Are you anticipating anything different, any changes in plans for that coming up in a few weeks?
I always think there will be more evaluation, but let me make this clear, because I have, as you know, I got haters on my right and haters on my left, and some have continued to question, the police budget increase, the 30% pay raise increase for new officers and others. It's something I stand by. I have great confidence in the Kansas City Police Department. They did outstanding work protecting not just several 100,000 people from Missouri and Kansas last week, but even more personally, myself and my family. There was certainly a tragedy last week, one that I think we see under the current paradigm in which we live in the world is very hard to prevent, although that doesn't mean all of us in the system won't try to find ways to prevent it. But I have confidence in them. I know that the chief, our command staff, and others are working on a strong plan to keep people safe. And so I know that they will work closely with parade organizers. But I'll tell you something that would make it a lot easier. If Quinton Lucas could drop an ordinance today, and today is City Council meeting day, that says guns are banned at parades other than law enforcement. You can be kicked out of the parade, you can be arrested or anything else if anyone sees you with a firearm. And then our officers can say, get the heck out of here if they see one of these people walking around or making some gesture towards a backpack. That'd make us all safer in the next few weeks. And I guess that's what some of us want to work for. And frankly, I heard the governor actually on another radio show last week, too, that ended up getting attention for what I said, who said, in one way, right, there's a difference between quail hunting and inner city and urban issues. I agree. And so let's make sure people that are taking guns for quail hunting and long rifles and others aren't on the parade route on Broadway a few weeks from now. That's the sort of thing that I think we need to see, and hopefully we get to that point in Kansas City in our community to do that. And by the way, this is not an either-or, Pete, and I know I'm taking up time, but I think it also means that these assailants need to face justice quickly and efficiently. I'm not here defending any of them. I would like to see all of them in jail the day of. I would like to have seen the Crown Center shooters in jail the day of. I mean, these are the sorts of things where I think we do need that swiftness of punishment, and I look forward to working with the police department and all of our prosecutors to see how we can get there.
I mean, you say there, gesture towards a backpack. I think that's great, but once again, it ties back to the issue. If you go after somebody who makes a gesture towards a backpack, and let's just lay it out there, right? If a young black male makes a gesture towards a backpack and a cop tries to arrest that person with some city ordinance and it turns out he doesn't have a gun, you know that becomes a national story, an anti-cop narrative, and it's going to be tough to slow that down.
Well, let me tell you something that I'm sure you remember, others may not. And this is where, and I can't get rid of all narratives and all of that. First of all, I think if we actually had enforceable ordinances on the books that weren't preempted by state law, that officer has probable cause for that stop, to question that suspect, or at least reasonable suspicion to say, hey, what do you have? This looks like something. Person opens, it is what it is, right? And I think that does give us that. This mayor, the guy you're talking to now, remember that story of the unarmed pregnant woman who was both armed and not pregnant, right? And what I said at the time almost immediately was to a lot of people out there, even though we couldn't give up the facts instantly, is that you're getting ahead of things, you're getting things wrong, and frankly, we did stand up for law enforcement on that one, and you know what? I'd like to have the opportunity to, but you know what my balance is, and I think you would strike this same balance too. I believe absolutely in civil rights. I think the situation I just laid out would give reasonable suspicion for an officer to stop someone. And what I would like to say is if we can save lives in our community, including a hell of a lot of black lives, including about 100 of black folks, probably 165 who were murdered last year, then I think that would make one heck of a difference for us. And I'd be happy to talk to all of the many activists, many of whom, as you know, don't particularly like me either, to say, you know what, this is about actually saving lives in our community and using reasonable laws to make us safer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes all the sense in the world. I really do. And I hope that those are conversations that are being had in this town with yourself and maybe those who disagree with that idea going forward. We always do appreciate it, Mr. Mayor. I know it's been a very busy week for you, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much for the time.
Hey, appreciate the opportunity for the conversation, and thinking about everybody out there. My condolences still to Lisa Lopez Galvin's family. She's laid to rest this weekend, and we're sorry to see it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much to Quinton Lucas on KCMO.